Okay, I will admit that I'm guilty of it, if you will. That we read the book of, let's say First Thessalonians, which is what we're in today, or Romans, and man, we plow through all this good material, and we get to the last chapter, sometimes just the last like couple of verses, and it seems like Paul's just kind of rambling, just like, oh yeah, and think about this, and oh yeah, and think about that, and thanks for this, and thanks for that. I'll admit that I'm guilty of it, if you will, that at times I just skip over those words. I know. But it just is one of those things where it's just like, come on, Paul. Why are you just randomly throwing out stuff? Here's one of the things I've realized. In my desire to finish the chapter, or in this case, to finish the book, that I desire expediency more than honor the inspired words. Expediency is a cancer. Expediency is frightening. Because a lot of the times in our rush, we can miss gold. And that's what's happening to me here that's what I was convicted of this morning as I was reading 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Paul gets done with 1 Thessalonians and he is helping them with their hope. We talked about this in an earlier session. I believe it was, maybe over a year ago now. But in one of the sessions we talked about how lists matter. And with the Thessalonican church, whenever he lists faith, hope, and love, he actually flips the back two. Faith, love, and hope. Because they were struggling most with hope. And the Thessalonican church's struggle with hope prompts Paul to give us these powerful, powerful images in 1 Thessalonians 4 about the believers that have died and what will happen to them in Christ. And then we get to chapter 5, where he talks about the day of the Lord. And then you get to the end in verses 12 and following, and it's almost like he's just throwing out random things. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to make sure that we ask you to make sure you're working hard, verse 12. Hold also to, and, those workers for you, hold them in high esteem, live in peace with one another. It's like Paul is just listing out random things. But within these random comments, first of all, you realize they're not so random. They flow from what has come before. And second of all, what you find is, if you skip over them, you're skipping over absolute gold. Like verses 16, 17, and 18. Paul says, verse 16, rejoice always. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 16, two words, rejoice always. Never stop rejoicing. Verse 17, pray continually. Two words. Never stop praying. But what I want to focus on is the 5 words that begin verse 18. Give thanks in all circumstances. And then he concludes these 3 commands. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. 3 commands, and this is how he ends it. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. One of the things I teach my kids all the time is, as I say, listen, I know you're not going to understand every single thing that I ask of you or that I tell you, but you need to trust that my goal as your dad is to protect you, to fight for you, to make sure that you're not just safe, but to protect you at times from yourself. There are times that I get into where I feel like the distance between me and the Lord is cavernous. And whenever I feel this distance between me and God, it's incredible how the distance I feel between me and those around me seems to grow as well. What is the cure for those moments? Maybe that's even where you find yourself in this video today. You find yourself feeling distant from the ones that you love, distant from even just your acquaintances, distance from even yourself, all the way because it's distance from the Lord. How do you rebuild that bridge? How do you turn the tide? I think all 3 of the commands matter, but I think how you turn the tide is the 3rd one. Give thanks in all circumstances. Why? Because the pathway of connection in all relationships between you and the Lord, you and each other, you and yourself, the pathway to connection is paved with gratitude. It's incredible to me how whenever I am in a wayward moment, whenever I am struggling to even just connect with myself, whenever I make it a discipline to start prayerfully thanking the Lord for things in my life, it's incredible how my heart starts to follow, starts to obey the prayer. Or, for example, whenever my wife and I are struggling, or whenever I just don't feel the connection, it's incredible to me how whenever I just sit and in my time of prayer begin to offer thanks for the connection the Lord has given me to this woman, whenever I start to offer thanks for the ways in which she challenges me, the ways in which she cares for me, that I get to come home and to be with her, and it's amazing how the tide begins to turn for our children, for the people that are, or even whenever we're struggling with grief, thinking about a loved one that has passed. Gratitude turns the tide of depression in a way in which I do not know that we have any other tool given to us by God. It's a movement of grace. It's just one that we undersell. It's one that we don't understand, that as we give gratitude, we receive back, or maybe I should even better say, our eyes begin to open to the pursuit of God to us. Whenever I read, rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, what I actually read is first, hope, second, faith, and third, love. Rejoice always, hope. Rejoice always. In the face of all circumstances, constantly rejoice because you believe there is something beyond what you can see. Pray continually. Faith. Be committed to consistently going back to the Word, consistently engaging God Himself in faith. And give thanks in all circumstances. Love. Notice this, though, too. If I'm pulling Paul's words in from 1 Corinthians 13, I would say this: faith, hope, and love. But don't forget, the greatest of these is love. The power of gratitude is one that we shouldn't just celebrate one time a year at Thanksgiving. It's one that we need to consistently engage in order to make sure that we are actually walking the path of Christ. I love you guys. Have a good week.